I'm Meg McCann. I'm a parishioner at St. Philip's in Durham, and I'm going to be talking about some resolutions that came out of our diocesan conventions. But before I do that, I just want to mention very briefly, there's a new video called Love Free or Die about Bishop Robinson, which is an excellent portrayal of all the struggles that he and the church have been through. But the reason I'm mentioning it now is that it has 5 or 6 minutes of footage of General Convention. As you probably know, in the beginning of the prayer book, there is a calendar that has names of our saints. And we propose that some North Carolina folks be added to that calendar. One was Polly Murray, the Reverend Dr. Colleen Murray, who was the first African-American woman ordained a priest in the Episcopal Church, grew up in Durham. She had a very rich life, quite varied life as an activist and a person who was an attorney and historian, a writer. She was an amazing woman, and then went to seminary and was ordained as a priest. The other set of people were Manteo and Virginia Dare, who were the first two people baptized in the Episcopal Church on these shores before we were actually the Episcopal Church. Manteo was a Native American. Virginia Dare was the first child of English parents born here and then baptized. So the two of them were baptized about the same time. So we approved these resolutions at a diocesan convention 4 or 5 years ago, and we sent them to the last General Convention. They were on the calendar of the Convention Committee on Prayer Book Liturgy and Church Music, which had a lot of things to talk about. They spent a lot of time talking about the blessing of unions of same-gender persons. Lorraine was on that committee, and she can testify to all the testimonials they heard about that issue. They also had a whole new set of commemorations to deal with. Until that General Convention, we had a book called Lesser Feasts and Fasts that included readings and so forth for each of the people on our calendar of commemorations. That was revised in a wholesale fashion to become Holy Women, Holy Men, Celebrating the Saints. And so that entire book was being considered by that committee. So needless to say, they didn't have a whole lot of time to deal with individual commemorations. They did hold hearings on Polly Murray, and we spoke at those hearings, but that never actually made it to convention. As you just heard from Martha, some things just never get dealt with at convention because they run out of time. This book includes information about how some of the considerations for how people would get added to this in the future. They had a list of a number of people who they had considered but did not include because one of their requirements was that the person had been dead for 50 years, which makes some sense, and you want to be sure that the person is still considered to be important 50 years later. But our contention was that Polly Murray will always be the first African-American woman ordained a priest in the Episcopal Church, no matter when she's added to the calendar. So thankfully, so these were not actually dealt with at convention, so they were referred to the Standing Committee on Liturgy and Music, which did consider them, and one of the resolutions that's coming before this convention, General Convention, is a list of about 10 new commemorations, and I'm very happy to say that Polly Murray and Manteo and Virginia Dare are on that list. So we're quite optimistic that they'll be added fairly easily to the calendar. One other resolution I want to talk about just briefly was approved at the most recent diocesan convention, a resolution to the 77th General Convention from the Diocese of North Carolina on pursuing a just peace in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. This calls on Executive Council and staff to develop and implement a strategy of education and advocacy. It mentions specifically a couple of educational programs that can be used. It notes that the Episcopal Church has long supported a just peace in this region, opposing the building of illegal settlements, the building of separation walls, demolition of homes, and so forth. And then, as I said, it recommends a number of different things that people can do. It encourages travel to the region as pilgrims and as witnesses. It encourages the Episcopal Public Policy Network to focus on this issue. And it recommends consideration of using the church's investment portfolio to influence companies that do business in the region, and also to educate individuals about purchasing decisions related to items that might be coming from that region. So I hope this gives you some idea of what happens to resolutions that get debated first here in North Carolina and then move on to General Convention.